The Marvel Universe is full of unbelievably powerful cosmic beings. Beings like the original Beyonder. Introduced in the first Secret Wars in 1985, the one from Beyond was the most powerful being to ever appear in the Marvel Universe up to that point. His powers were out of the league of nearly everyone, as shown in Secret Wars 2, with few able to match him. That is part of the reason why the retcon of his origin from the Illuminati miniseries was so bad. The story revealed that the Beyonder was not an omnipotent being from beyond the universe at all, but actually some kind of mutant inhuman, which is supposed to be impossible. So, of course, that combination somehow gave him his amazing powers. It was ridiculous, made all the worse by the fact that Black Bolt knew the whole time. Luckily, this was retconned because of how much people hated it. But with Kamala Khan being revealed as a mutant inhuman, it kinda makes me wonder where Marvel will go with that. From the day of Lucas Bishop's debut in Uncanny X-Men, he was a good guy. Righteous, self-sacrificing, a literal man of the law from the future. Which is why, when we saw his sudden and drastic change to brutal villainy, most fans were left pretty flabbergasted, even if the explanation was clear and out in the open. We knew that Bishop came to the main 616 timeline to stop what was commonly referred to as the X-Traitor. At first, he thought it was Gambit. Then after Onslaught, he thought it was Xavier, but then, 10 years later, Bishop decided once and for all that it was actually the first baby born since M-Day, Hope Summers. The child would soon be adopted by Cable, and Bishop set out to send the sweet fresh mutant back to the Shadow Realm. Bishop nearly took the life of Professor X, and he slaughtered the entire population of a future version of Earth just to cut down on the places Cable and Hope could run and hide in. The Messiah story arc was honestly loved by so many people, but the heel turn in Bishop's personality was then explained away as being possessed by a demon bear. Next up, we are talking about the awful couple of Hawkeye and Mockingbird. This whole relationship honestly kinda seems like a cheap way of capitalizing on the Green Arrow and Black Canary coupling that DC had going on, but these two were nowhere near as compatible as their DC counterparts. The best example of that would be the whole thing surrounding a guy called Phantom Rider. To sum it all up, Mockingbird is caught and physically mistreated by the Phantom Rider, and so in turn she eventually gets her revenge, taking the Rider's life. Hawkeye, instead of supporting his traumatized partner, is scared off by the fact that she took the life of her assailant, and he dumps her. It all got retconned. Now, the story changed so that Mockingbird actually consented to do the jiggy with Phantom Rider, which means she then took his life for seemingly no reason at all. Hawkeye just used the killing of Phantom Rider as the excuse to break up with her, when the real reason was because she had cheated. Sentry Fallen Son is a comic that depicts the funeral for the Sentry after he was taken down by Thor during the Siege event. A whole bunch of superheroes are at his funeral. They're all giving their thoughts and prayers, saying nice things about the Sentry. Thor even goes and dances with Sentry's mom, which was super cute. And then we have Rogue. Rogue tries to say her piece at the funeral, and she talks about how she went for a long time without being able to touch somebody except for the Sentry, who was the only person who could hug her. And then she gets really overwhelmed and runs off crying. Then, in a little under the breath moment between Johnny Storm and Cyclops, it's basically implied that Rogue and Sentry had, they did the thing. It's just super random and super unnecessary and kind of in bad taste, and it's just super out of place. While Jean Grey coming back after the Dark Phoenix saga was one of the greatest X-Men moments of all time, it was still just a little bit convoluted. Basically, it all kicks off when out in space the X-Men were bombarded with cosmic radiation. Jean Grey towed the line between life and death, but managed to return alive by making a sort of pact with the Phoenix Force. Unfortunately, it also eventually led to the Dark Phoenix saga, which told the story of the fall of Jean Grey to Dark Phoenix. After events with the Shi'ar and the X-Men, Jean sacrificed herself in order to save the universe from the Dark Phoenix she had become. Years later, in Fantastic Four number 286, it was revealed that Jean Grey had somehow been alive this entire time, and the being that actually went through the Phoenix and Dark Phoenix sagas was just the Phoenix Force itself that took on the form of Jean Grey. This brought the fan-favorite character back to life, but devalued the whole Phoenix and Dark Phoenix sagas for fans and made people hate Jim Shooter, Marvel's editor-in-chief at the time. Over 1 million years ago, the early human mutant known as Firehair became the avatar of the Phoenix Force and nearly destroyed the entire planet. She began assembling a team of supernatural and mystical beings to protect humanity and Earth. The eventual team was made up of the Asgardian god Odin Borson, the demigod sorcerer Agamotto, Mephisto, the Black Panther of the Panther Tribe, the woolly mammoth riding Ghost Rider, Iron Fist Fanfei, and a super smart caveman who wielded the Star Brand. Now after fighting some corrupted Celestials as well as time-traveling villains from the present like Thanos, multiple Doctor Dooms, and Mephisto, the team eventually disbanded. The only problem is that given the actual legit history of the Earth, it doesn't make any sense. Like, at all. It does not work. There's a Ghost Rider riding a woolly mammoth, so like you win some, you lose some, you know what I mean? During the Planet Hulk storyline, Bruce Banner was tricked by his supposed friends, all members of the Illuminati, and was sent to the planet of Sakaar, which he liberated then conquered. Then he mistakenly believed that a device set up by the Illuminati had laid low millions of his own people, including his wife. Hulk came back to Earth and laid waste to those that betrayed him. Nothing could stop him. In the end, Hulk was about to destroy the entire planet before Tony Stark called down a combined strike from orbital satellites that finally took down the Hulk. This conclusion of World War Hulk felt very lackluster, with the Hulk basically just giving up and allowing Iron Man to unleash his Deus Ex Machina. So a few years later, a retcon for that sequence explained that the satellites were actually siphoning off gamma radiation from Hulk's body. It was also used to explain the creation of the Red Hulk, which people did not like, and it was followed by Red Hulk taking the leading role in a series that was supposed to be about the actual Green Hulk. Also, if Tony had all this satellite gamma draining technology, why did they even send Hulk to Sakaar in the first place? But speaking of the Hulk, while I and a lot of comic book fans are actually huge fans of the Immortal Hulk series and how it brought some significant changes to the character of the Hulk, the run also happened to make some big changes to the origin of the character, and for a lot of fans, you just don't really mess with that kind of thing. The Hulk's traditional origin saw Bruce Banner studying gamma radiation, helping to design the gamma bomb. While they were testing the device, Bruce rushed out and saved Rick Jones, who was in the literal blast radius, exposing Bruce to massive amounts of gamma radiation. Immortal Hulk takes that but also makes it supernatural. Now, gamma radiation has magical elements that weaken the barrier between our world and a hell-like place that lies below all others called the Below Place, where the One Below All lives. The gamma then allows the One Below All to turn these gamma mutates into his avatars on Earth. Hulk is the greatest one of them. I kinda like this one, but I understand why longtime fans absolutely do not. The Marvel story's Secret Empire introduced the idea that Captain America, the beacon of hope, was secretly an undercover Hydra super soldier. This Hydra Cap organized the second superhuman civil war, as well as Chitauri invasions on the Earth. He got promoted to director of S.H.I.E.L.D. and influenced the legislation of the S.H.I.E.L.D. Act, which gave S.H.I.E.L.D. way more authority. He then used that power to basically organize a Hydra takeover of America. Steve Rogers revealed himself as not only a longtime Hydra defector, but the Hydra Supreme. Hydra, who had seriously infiltrated S.H.I.E.L.D., began assuming control of key locations and executing anyone who stood in his way. The reveal of Captain America as a Hydra agent completely took readers by surprise. Now Marvel realized and even admitted their mistake, and so the story got retconned to have it so that the character known as Cubic, who was essentially a living cosmic cube in the form of a child, was manipulated by Hydra to create a Captain America who grew up being loyal to Hydra. This Hydra Cap would eventually supplant the real Captain America of Earth 616 until the true Captain America came back and beat the snot out of him. Next up, we're talking about Wolverine. One of Wolverine's main abilities is his incredible healing factor. It was so incredibly powerful that Wolverine seemed to be able to just brush off death like it was the common cold, and so Marvel had to start doing some talking. When Marvel decided that time had come to finally wipe out Wolverine for real this time, they needed a new explanation for how he managed to cheat death in the past, and so in Mark Guggenheim and Howard Chaykin's 2008 Wolverine run, it was revealed that Wolverine actually had in fact passed away before. Many times, but each time he did, he also fought Lazair, the literal angel of death, for the right to come back to life. Wolverine discovered that his soul had also been damaged, and so he made a deal with Lazair himself to fix his soul, which had the added side effect that he would stay dead. Then came the death of Wolverine's story, and can you guess what happened? He came back to life again. The Scarlet Witch has been a part of Avengers stories much more than she was a part of mutant-related stories. Quicksilver, on the other hand, has had more activity within the X-books. Them being twins makes them inseparable if a change in their parents is made. It has been definitively established many years ago that Magneto was their dad, with the initial reveal being reinforced numerous times over the years, as well as as the status of Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver being mutants also being reinforced. But after Quicksilver ended up being used in Avengers and the X-Men films, it was time to do something about the twins being mutants. It was then revealed that the High Evolutionary had actually messed with their genetics, something which had been established in the past, and that they never had X genes. This completely contradicts past established events, including the then relatively recent Avengers vs. X-Men event when Hope Summers used her mutant powers to mimic mutant abilities of others to join with the Scarlet Witch to defeat the Phoenix Force by saying no more Phoenix. Now that Disney owns Fox and the rights to the X-Men and mutants in general, they could go back and re-retcon Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver as mutants again, and all that it would really do is create another lie that the High Evolutionary told, having a number of other retcons that have happened in the past being related to lies he has told. Which have been a lot. Batman has many iconic villains. All of them stick out in their own individual ways, but there is a strong case to say that Mr. Freeze may actually be one of the most iconic. It may be due to his appearance in the Batman cartoons, because in the animated series, Mr. Freeze was given an incredibly understandable motive to commit crime than a lot of other Batman villains get, saving the life of his wife. His wife was dying of a disease, and he is keeping her frozen until he can find a cure, committing crimes to aid his research. It's so understandable that while Batman still attempts to stop Freeze, he finds himself empathizing with the villain in a way that he doesn't with a lot of his other villains. So it came as a shock to a lot of people when the New 52 came about and Scott Snyder retconned the continuity so that Mr. Freeze's beloved Nora Freeze became Nora Fields, and Mr. Freeze had actually never even met her while she was alive. This made Mr. Freeze into just another madman, but one obsessed with a random woman kept on ice at Wayne Enterprises. As you can imagine, people were not very happy about this one. In Marvel Comics, the Infinity Stones used to be these awesome, powerful artifacts representing the sum total of all the fundamental forces of the universe, or the multiverse at one point, and were the ultimate secret that Thanos uncovered while gazing into the Infinity Well. They came from before recorded time as part of a being of limitless power that existed before everything else that then destroyed itself to create the universe. You collect these stones and boom, you're super omnipotently powerful. But in the 2018-2019 series Infinity Wars, it was revealed that actually, no. In what I would say is the climax of the series, Loki uses an assembled set of Infinity Stones to transport himself to the unknown realm that existed beneath the Quarry of Creation, where he found a group of Celestials that guarded the deposit of Infinity Stones. Basically, with this retcon, the Infinity Stones are mined by these Celestials, and that this place contains countless Infinity Stones which get sent to other universes by the Celestials. It's just kind of dumb if you ask me. It makes the stones appear so much less important or powerful. On the charts of cosmic entities, the Celestials are actually pretty low in the ladder, and they're the ones who are responsible for the stones? Kind of boring. I don't like it. Get out of here. Get out of here with that. When looking at characters with tons and tons of retcons, Marvel's Wolverine easily tops the charts. His retcons have retcons. One of the most hated of these retcons is the Lupin. In Jeff Loeb and Simone Bianchi's Wolverine number 50 from 2007, Wolverine started having dreams of a mysterious figure known as Romulus. Romulus was thousands of years old and had been manipulating Wolverine before he was born. Cool. That's fine. What was less fine was when Romulus made it appear as though Wolverine was not a mutant at all, but was actually a completely different species of sapien called the Lupine sapien. Men evolved from wolves. Now, the actual idea of this could be seen as kind of cool, but to make Wolverine himself into one of the Lupin sapiens was kind of dumb and super problematic, as it conflicted with a lot of established lore, especially Wolverine's origins when his mutant power activated in the traumatic event of his not father's shooting. Sabretooth as a Lupin, or Romulus himself as a Lupin, all those other feral looking characters in Marvel, sure, that could be actually pretty cool, but not Wolverine, man. Like I said, his retcons have retcons, and this one was pretty quickly undone by Remus revealing that it was all a lie and that Romulus was trying to create the Lupin instead, which I don't know if that's better, but there you go. Now look, there is no way to do a list like this and not talk about sins past. There is no silver lining here, there's no positive here. There's only gross, stupid, and confusing here. Basically, two twin assassins show up in New York on the trail of Spider-Man, and to cut a sucky story short, these twins were actually the secret children of Gwen Stacy and Norman Osborn. Apparently the reason that Goblin threw Gwen Stacy off of a bridge all the way back in the day was not because he wanted to mess with Peter Parker. It was actually because he wanted to hide the fact that Gwen had recently given birth to Norman's little baby twins and was threatening to not let Norman see them again. And of course, Gwen is forced to go through with it, which I'll remind you, she showed no signs of being pregnant at all, and she gives birth to twins. It's weird. Also, because of Norman's irradiated genetics, these twins age really quickly and develop Green Goblin abilities. Basically, Marvel decided that ruining the image and importance of Gwen Stacy and her passing was worth it to create an extremely overcomplicated arc that goes nowhere and adds nothing but ickiness to the Spider-Man continuity. I can never look at Norman's face without seeing that face, and you know what I'm talking about. Luckily, this was retconned as well, so. When it comes to DC Comics, there are far too many retcons to speak about that fans hated. A lot of disliked retcons came about during their huge reboot known as the New 52, which rewrote a lot of origins. One hero whose origin got rewritten to suck was Wonder Woman. First of all, the New 52 changed the Amazons from being benevolent isolationists to more aggressive xenophobes. That's no bueno. Then it was revealed that Wonder Woman herself is now the daughter of Zeus. Now, while you could argue that this is an interesting take, it just pulls a lot away from the character, and DC didn't even do anything with it. Originally, Diana didn't have any men involved in her origin, except for the god Hermes, who was one of her patrons, and of course Steve Trevor. The New 52 Diana explicitly derives her power from and owes her existence to a man, rather than being from blessings from largely goddesses. And on top of that, if you look at Greek mythology, it's a man who's pretty awful to women. Zeus slept around a lot, man. Like a lot. But it just didn't serve any constructive purpose, which kinda sucks. Avengers Disassembled and House of M are arguably some of the worst things a superhero has ever done. But for Scarlet Witch, the one who did it all, it was the result of years and years of trauma for the character that reached ahead and pushed her to wipe out her fellow Avengers and depower the vast majority of an entire race of people after changing reality itself. However, Marvel didn't want to actually make Wanda responsible for what she did. That would make her too human and fallible, and they also couldn't use her for a vast majority of stories since everyone basically saw her as a villain now. So, Avengers The Children's Crusade retconned the whole thing. Instead of making Scarlet Witch's breakdown the fault of her years of trauma, it was changed to explain that, working with Dr. Doom, she channeled the life force to try and reincarnate her children. Power of the life force coursing through her drove her crazy, and that's why she had a breakdown. It's just kinda such a cop-out. I don't like it. Next up, the Punisher has always been an incredibly controversial character for Marvel Comics, and that's never been surprising. His MO is extremely bloodthirsty, and his comics have some of the most brutal imagery in all of Marvel. The Punisher's instantly identifiable skull symbol in recent years has also been adopted by some misguided members of law enforcement, and also appropriated by certain political groups, which is a topic I'd like to avoid as much as possible. That's almost certainly one of the big reasons why he's been sidelined by Marvel the past couple of years, but more recently, the Punisher series established a new status quo where Frank Castle is now an enforcer of the hand, and with that came a big change to his symbol, shifting from his classic skull to the image of an Oni. And while that annoyed people who had adopted this symbol, the first issue of the story also revealed that one of the reasons he had shifted to become a warlord of the hand was because they had resurrected his wife, Maria. Now eventually, it was also revealed that Frank Castle's family wasn't as happy as some might have thought, with Maria almost taking his life now, and later admitting that she wanted a divorce from him the day of her passing, and that his entire crusade on crime was basically disrespecting her and their children, not honoring them like he thought. Basically, Marvel made it clear that Frank is not a good guy, but most of us kind of already knew that. Identity Crisis was a really engaging mystery story that paid great close attention to comic book history, but unfortunately, it's another one of DC's strange retconning events that changed quite a few things that left readers completely flabbergasted. From the super unnecessary use of Dr. Light's attack on Sue Dibney, which was just another example of fridging, to the Justice League approved mind wipes that seemed kind of evil in the grand scheme of things, there were just some interesting choices made here. Sure, wiping Dr. Light's Knight's mind and turning him into essentially an idiot for what he did maybe seemed darkly justified, but wiping Batman's memory as well? It eventually caused Bruce to create the Brother MK1 satellite, which eventually became Brother I, and created the OMAX. Catwoman also suspected that her personality shift from villain to basically a hero might not have been her own choice, and it caused the villain community to band together over the fear of being mind-wiped, leading Lex Luthor to create the Society, and it even caused the falling apart of the Justice League eventually. It's just not a good time. The words "one more day" and hated retcons go hand in hand. J. Michael Straczynski's run of Amazing Spider-Man is looked at as one of the best in the wall crawler's history. That run ends after Marvel Comics' Civil War when Aunt May is wounded by an assassin hired by Wilson Fisk to take out Peter Parker. This results in Peter doing everything he can possibly think of to find a way to help her. In the end, it was actually a deal Mary Jane Watson made with Mephisto that saved Aunt May. That agreement ended the marriage between MJ and Peter Parker and destroyed over 2 decades of continuity. The most important part of that was his life with MJ. Not being married to Mary Jane Watson ruined one of the best relationships in comic books and caused ripples throughout Marvel Comics. None of the stories that came after depended on Spider-Man being unmarried, and he's had no memorable relationships that make the idea of an unmarried Spider-Man worthwhile. It actually did a lot more harm than good, turning away many longtime readers of Spider-Man in one go. Spider-Man fans wish this story never happened, and I don't blame them.
Up first is Beast, because he has been very active lately and making even his own dedicated fans jump ship. It all started when Beast was appointed head of Krakoa's intelligence service, and at first he was the mutant for the job. However, he lost the plot pretty quick, started doing the protect by any means necessary thing, and that never ends well. Pretty soon, Beast was responsible for the downfall of a country, the downfall of Wolverine's mental state, and the destruction of a UN submarine with people on it. That's not even everything. His final big act was building a black hole gun for the purpose of sucking Arakko into a cosmic vault for safekeeping. He was stopped and sent into said vault. Beast must have passed the point of no return because Marvel didn't even give the character a redemption arc. They just got a clone of Beast, put his memories up to before he started acting bad, and bam! New, old Beast that everyone can now like again. Next is the 2015 failed Fantastic Four reboot that really could not have gone worse. Today we are haters together, and I think that's beautiful. Fantastic Four 2015 is sitting at a 9% on Rotten Tomatoes. Lots of people hate the reboot because it was just worse than the original. If you are going to reboot something, you have to minimum make it better than the original version. That should be common practice, and yet here we are. I will admit that I saw this in theaters and I thought the movie was fine, mainly because it had Miles Teller in it, and it wasn't until I watched parts of it again later that I realized it does deserve that 9%. Across the board, reviews for the movie say that the characterization was weak and the story was boring. There are also claims that because the director had a falling out with the studio, the movie had a bunch of reshoots that made it feel less cohesive. It was a mess, and people are hoping that the upcoming reboot Marvel is planning will be better. One of the worst comics to ever come from Marvel has to be the ridiculous Marville. That's M-A-R-V-I-L-L-E. Series from 2002. It was part of the You Decide campaign, a public contest, or many think publicity stunt. The contest put 3 Marvel comics against each other. Of the 3, Marville was the worst for sure. It's a satire about Marvel and DC Comics, but the writing is just bad. Marville follows Kal AOL, who gets sent back in time by his parents to save him from the meteor strike of 5002. Only the world didn't get destroyed, so his parents sent the time machine to him so he could come back. Marville doesn't go home. He goes to the dawn of time to meet God, but what makes everything hilarious is that the last issue was a submission guideline book that contained tips for writing a good comic. I wish wish I had that level of confidence. Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool, specifically in the Wolverine origin movie. Hopefully I didn't scare y'all too bad for a second there. Obviously, the Deadpool Ryan Reynolds movies are great. His portrayal of Deadpool is incredibly spot on. However, his first on-screen appearance as the character proved to be a dumpster fire. Even though he knew this version of Deadpool was going to be a miss, studio execs apparently told the actor to play Deadpool as the character was, or they would find someone else. Reynolds finished the movie, it was hated, like he said would happen, and then he was able to push for the Deadpool R-rated movies we are thankful for today. Some people think the origin version of Deadpool was so bad they should have just made Reynolds not Deadpool and made him some other original character. He pretty much already was. 2011 Stan Lee NHL partnership had the potential to be super cool, but then flopped like the Toronto Maple Leafs do every year. Stan Lee worked with the NHL to create superheroes for each hockey team in the league, and for the most part, a team's hero was just an elevated version of their mascot. All 30 heroes were featured in the 2011 All-Stars game. These heroes were meant to be more than just pictures. A CGI animated short was created to debut the hockey heroes, and there were future plans for comics and movies and a TV series. They planned for these to tap into the younger audience of hockey fans and become wildly successful. They didn't, and it was actually the opposite. They became wildly unsuccessful, and people generally hate many of the heroes. The main issue with these supers was that many of them were just existing character designs with one or two differences, and the storyline for the characters wasn't very compelling. Safe to say, these heroes will probably be staying out of the game and in the penalty box for the future. The SAS Brothers kicked off in 1989 and lasted 6 issues because people hated them so much. Reviewers literally compared the comic to garbage and hoped that there wouldn't be any more issues after the first. The entire thing is a spin-off from a one-off comic strip created for Doctor Who called Follow That TARDIS. The story follows a pair of brothers who grew up as orphans on an Earth far in the future that looks kind of like if you combine steampunk and 80s neon aesthetics. It's full of pollution and crime and monsters and aliens. It's very corrupt and generally unwelcoming, so that's the vibe. And the job the brothers have picked to survive this harsh landscape is private investigator. They're good at what they do, getting the right results, even if they don't always use the most morally sound methods. The jokes in it were off. Also, there was just very little working for them. The brothers were seen in the totally stonking, surprisingly educational, and utterly mind-boggling comic relief comic, and then the backup story in Image Comics' Elephant Man issue 16, and then they haven't been seen since, for good reason. Unfortunately, we are back talking about Mr. Ryan Reynolds for a different super offense. That time he played Hal Jordan in 2011's Green Lantern. People are pretty divided on whether his performance was the only good thing about the movie or just another bad addition. It's safe to say Reynolds did the best he could with what he was given, but you let us know your thoughts in the comments section. We know Ryan's thoughts on the film if the Deadpool 2 post-credit scenes are anything to go off of. The film might have been a mess, but at least Reynolds met his future partner in crime, Blake Lively, on the set. Arabian Knight is next, and this guy has gone under a more intense microscope in the past few years. We love representation. It's great when it's done well. Arabian Knight might be a very powerful Muslim hero, but when he is also a visual stereotype with no real character behind him, that's not great, and that's not even coming from me. Editor Andy Schmidt said that, and I just agree. Thankfully, Marvel recognized the potential in this actually being a great hero, so they rebooted him, probably hoping we all just leave the original in the faraway depths of our minds. The original Arabian Knight had a special magic carpet that would only respond to his mental commands, and his weapon was a scimitar. In the new version, that magic carpet got unraveled and made into a suit for Arabian Knight that still gives him all the same powers the carpet had had. So less stereotypical and more just cool guy. If you don't already hate this next character, you should. His name is Whitewash Jones and should never have seen the light of day. The character is so awful, I can't even believe it. Jones was in The Young Allies alongside Bucky Barnes. The character was a very racially insensitive depiction and wasn't well put together. It was so bad, Marvel retconned the earlier versions of him to not be like the real guy and instead be a made-up character for propaganda purposes. When Marvel did the big retcon, they just redesigned the character and created the real Washington Wash Jones in 2009. This should have never happened in the first place, but at least Marvel realized the error of their ways. But what could be worse than Whitewash Jones? Well, spot 1 is reserved for DC's Brown Bomber. You think the name is bad? Get ready for the explanation. Brown Bomber is one of those characters that when he says a certain word, he transforms into his hero persona. Think Shazam, but in this case, he yells Black Power. Brown Bomber can't remember anything that happens between his two personas. They don't know the other persona exists. The Brown Bomber character that appears when he yells Black Power is a very strong, powerful black man. His hero outfit is basically a basketball uniform. Just guess what DC made Brown Bomber's other persona. Throw something out there. I can't actually say what the person is for fear of being demonetized, but the definition of them is a person who believes that white people constitute a superior race and should therefore dominate society. Who did this? This guy was supposed to also be the first black DC superhero. Tony Isabella literally had to create Black Lightning so that DC wouldn't release this guy at the time. Up first is the retconning of the reason Krypton, Superman's planet, was destroyed. The story up until 2018 was Krypton's core ran out of energy, or the sun close to it collapsed on itself, causing the planet to go down with it. It's a nice commentary on how we should pay attention to the signs nature gives us. It's a really simple, easy, iconic character origin story. The people love it. Then 2018 rolls around and DC decides to change it. The idea of an advanced race ignoring the fall of its own planet despite a small few trying to warn them, well, now that doesn't relate to the human race at all, so let's retcon it and make the destruction of the planet due to a big monster instead of the fault of its own dominant species. That will surely resonate with people. So they brought in Rogol-Zar. This monster was created by Jor-El with the intention to destroy Krypton. The monster believed that Krypton and its people were a threat to the universe, so they had to go. Zar was introduced and battled Superman and Supergirl quite a bit, but many readers say that the fights and the monster character just weren't that compelling. In the end, he did just end up in permanent stasis, so other than being the reason Clark's planet exploded, his impact was small. The characters seemed to have a lot of potential that was never fully realized. Overall, many DC fans give the whole thing a double thumbs down and agree that the character was an odd addition at best, embarrassing at worst. And let's look at the strangest era for comics, the 90s, responsible for Iron Man's villain era, among other odd things, of course. In the Avengers The Crossing issues, we find out that Tony Stark has been under the control of Kang the Conqueror for years. Not just like the past little bit, but long enough that it makes you question everything. Tony, while under Kang's control, had been slowly working at deteriorating the lives of the Avengers. He was the reason the Wasp's finances were destroyed. He also eliminated Quicksilver's nanny. Unfortunately for the Avengers, Iron Man is so evil, the only person who could defeat him is him. So the Avengers do the reasonable thing and travel back in time to get a not yet corrupted teen Tony. They chose a teen to be safe because who knows how long Tony had been mind controlled for. Teen Tony worked out because evil Tony realized the error of his ways and sacrificed himself to save the day. That leaves young Tony as the only Tony for a little while. To top this thrilling saga off, the whole Kang controlling thing was also retconned. It wasn't Kang, it was Immortus, who is actually technically Kang, just mature Kang. Snowflame is a controversial DC character that initially was thought to be destroyed after a fight with the New Guardians, but was so funny he was retcon revived. Snowflame is controversial because he is a villain that activates his powers using the kind of snow that one might use their nose as a means to ingest. Some people love him, some people hate him, some people wanted to see him flame again, others were okay letting him be extinguished. This retcon is, in comparison to the others on this list, simple. All that happens is a questionable character is brought back to life. I'm not Snowflame's biggest fan personally, but I can't deny that he is funny. His latest demise via death via snorting a poison dart frog is definitely the strangest thing I've seen, and we'll have to see if that will also result in a retcon revival. Nightcrawler's family tree is just a full-on Willow at this point with all the parents he has. As it stands now, his father is Mystique, his mother is Destiny, Destiny, his fake dad is Azazel, and his deceased stepdad is Baron Wagner. Even though Nightcrawler was always supposed to be Mystique and Destiny's child, when you throw in all the previous lore, it just makes everything confusing and leads to a lot of Marvel fans disliking the retcon. The bare bones of the story go as follows. Mystique was married to Baron Wagner, had an affair with Azazel, and had their baby, raising Nightcrawler as if he were the Baron's son. So everyone, for a long time, was under the impression that Nightcrawler was the son of Mystique and Azazel. Turns out, that's wrong, but also right. Mystique did have an affair with Azazel. It's actually very important that she did. Mystique, though, was really in love with Destiny the whole time, and they wanted a child. Mystique, because she is a gene shaper shapeshifter, she used Azazel as the base to mimic all the stuff she would need to be the father. That's why she needed to know Azazel intimately. Plus, Azazel wants to destroy humanity and the Earth. What villain doesn't? Destiny had a vision that this would happen should Azazel not have a tether to the Earth. So by making him think he was Nightcrawler's father, he would have a connection to the very thing he wanted to destroy, which would hopefully make him want to destroy it less. Destiny's vision is also the reason why Nightcrawler was abandoned, and to keep everything on track, Mystique shapeshifted a fake pregnancy belly and then had her memory erased afterwards. Somehow, this was the simplest solution to their problem. But again, this was always supposed to happen. Established X-Men writer Chris Claremont wanted to introduce the concept a long time ago. The world just wasn't ready yet. And welcome back to Tony Stark is suffering again. No matter which universe you look at, Iron Man is suffering, and that's just the way of the worlds. Tony finds out he was adopted. He is not really Howard Stark's son. Not that Howard put in the work to make him feel like his son anyway. Still, it would be quite a shock to receive that info. This retcon, I guess, makes sense in that it explains why Howard was such a horrible parent to Tony, but also some fans think it just wasn't necessary. It leaves people wondering just why it happened in the first place. We, and Tony, learned this shocking news in 2012's Iron Man 17. The Starks were planning on having a kid, only their kid didn't feel too good, and the only way to save this child was help from Alien 451. The alien helped get Arno Stark to term, but modified him in the process to one day wield the universe's most powerful suit of armor. Sound familiar? Arno was born, but Howard had done some modifying of his own that made the baby's health decline again. The Starks were worried about the aliens' reaction should they find out what Howard did, so they needed a cover. Enter Tony. It makes Tony's story so much sadder than it already is. He was literally just being adopted into a family, not to be loved, but to be a decoy that is forced to live up to unattainable standards for his entire life. Eventually, Tony met Alien 451 and tried and failed to pilot the armor. When he got back down to Earth, he looked into why he couldn't do it and found a tape in which Howard explained everything. Rough time. Wolverine is a magnet for retcons, not all of them winners, like for example, the Silver Fox debacle. Silver Fox was Wolverine's girlfriend. We met her for the first time in Wolverine 10. She was a sweet character, good for Wolverine, he really loved her. She unfortunately met her demise at the claws of Sabretooth. And this encounter is a large reason as to why Sabretooth and Wolverine hate each other. So it had a pretty big impact on Wolverine's life, but it was about to get even messier because Wolverine Volume 2 rolls out, and surprise, Silver Fox is retcon revived and she is now a Hydra agent. Apparently, the memories Wolverine had of her were fake, and the setting in which they lived, their cabin, was also fake. That did a number on Wolverine for nothing because it was later retconned again in House of M. Wolverine regains his real memories of the real Silver Fox, who is likely still deceased. The Hydra Silver Fox was either an impersonator or a clone or something. I feel like Wolverine should just permanently have an asterisk next to his name that just reads subject to change because he has more retcons than should be legally allowed. The passing of Martha and Thomas Wayne is one of, if not the most important moment in Batman's Bat career, which means it's been messed with more times than it should be. It usually keeps the general idea consistent. Bruce is out with his parents late at night, they meet a sketchy guy, the parents don't make it, and Bruce watches it happen. The everything else is subject to change. Who is the bad guy here? We don't know, and Bruce will never find out, which is why he's focused on fighting crime all over the city instead of simply hunting taking down one man. Wait, okay, it was actually Joe Chill, and it was totally random. Actually, scratch that, it's still Joe Chill, but he was hired to do it by a mob boss, so now Batman has a target. Wait, we're gonna change it again. This is really a part of a big conspiracy that Batman has to uncover. Okay, now we're going to keep pieces of this, but instead of both parents being hit with a bullet, it's just his dad was hit, and his mom suffered a heart attack from seeing it. Point is, it's messy. Plenty of fans agree that the first story is probably the best story. It made Bruce's story interesting, explained some of his behaviors, and as someone pointed out, the line from Batman Begins perfectly describes the tragedy of the incident. Bruce's parents were taken down by one of the very people they were trying to help, showcasing that Gotham was decaying along with his citizens. This next retcon was so bad, Stan Lee himself stopped it from ever being fully realized. I am talking about that time they almost established that Wolverine wasn't a mutant, but instead was once an actual Wolverine mutated by the High Evolutionary. This retcon was being set up in X-Men 98, the issue where Wolverine was seen without his mask for the first time and where it was revealed his claws were part of his body. In it, the X-Men are having their DNA analyzed or something like that, and one of the scientists remarks to their leader, "Is this Wolverine a mutant? His readings are nothing like the others." The people who worked on this comic later confirmed that this was their way of trying to set up Wolverine. Thankfully, the Marvel icon Stan Lee put a stop to this before anything permanent happened. Apparently, according to Dave Cockrum, Stan Lee found the concept disgusting. I hope that out there somewhere, or coming someday soon, is a what if story about what if Wolverine was actually a Wolverine, but let's keep that out of the main canon. Yet another love it or hate it retcon extravaganza is Superboy's retcon punch and everything it caused. To put it in the simplest terms possible, Superboy was residing in a pocket dimension at the time and wasn't happy with the dark parts of the main DC, so he punched a wall. But it wasn't just any wall, it was the source wall. The punch created time ripples that messed with a bunch of heroes' stories and rewrote a bunch of stuff. It wasn't a good time for anyone involved, and also the reason for such major rewrites happening is just plain and simple funny. It's objectively funny that Superboy punched a wall and caused serious ripples in the DC space-time continuum. Though the punch made a lot of weird things happen, it did bring back Jason Todd, and for that I do thank Superboy-Prime. And finally, Franklin Richards' mutant status is a touchy subject right now, and it has been since it was revealed the kid wasn't actually a mutant like we had been led to believe. Franklin Richards is the son of Mr. Fantastic and the Invisible Woman. He was thought to be a mutant and even got onto the exclusive mutant-only island, Krakoa, and made a bunch of friends. Only it later came out he wasn't a mutant at all, just a really powerful teenager. Franklin was accidentally making himself appear as a mutant, and when his powers got drained, he couldn't do that anymore, and that was when his non-mutant status was discovered. This retcon is frustrating, not just for fans, but also the character, because there was so much, now unnecessary, fighting that happened to get Franklin onto Krakoa. Mr. Fantastic did some things that severely damaged his relationship with Franklin, like initially preventing him from going to Krakoa by masking his X gene, which in the process, the X-Men and Fantastic Four destroy Washington Square Park, and now none of that matters. Plus, Franklin made all those friends on Krakoa, and now he can't even go back to see them. This is hard enough to keep up with as an outsider. Imagine this being your teenage years.